Okay, people, welcome back to hashtag Keep the Flame Alive, KTFA, and that's not keep the fuck away, it's keep the flame alive. Uh, Today, it's a great pleasure to have from all the way from Toronto, John Corr. Uh, John, welcome to the show.
How you doing, Sensei? I'm not in Toronto. First
I'm
things
good.
first,
Where are
I'm
you?
Hamilton proud. We're just down the road from Toronto. We're about an hour outside.
This is an international show, man. No one knows Hamilton, they know Toronto.
They need to know because that's where we train Aikido. Right now, that's the headquarters of Aikido Yoshinkai Canada. So let's put it on the map today, Sensei.
Ouch, ouch. Some people are going to, contest that one. But yes, uh, point taken. Okay, I see that poster you've got up behind you. John, tell me,
Oh,
what's eight
this
times
this
up?
little did you notice that?
Yeah,
I
I
just
noticed.
carry this around with me. I set this up wherever I go. If I'm putting gas at the car, I've got that up behind me, Sensei. This is to my thinking the greatest children's book about Aikido that's ever been written, and it just so happens to have been written by me. This is what is it, about 215 pages. This is a children's book. I've got a copy right here. Of course, I've got a copy. I wrote the thing. I wrote it a few years ago, but it was just published last year. It just came out in 2019, and it's
So,
received.
hold on. You say you wrote it a few years ago. How many years ago?
I started it about 2014, I think. I
Hmm.
started about 5 years ago. I would have to think back because I actually wrote it when I was largely unemployed. It was one of those things where I'm not trained as a creative writer. Uh, I do specialize in literature. I'm a professor now, but I was not a professor 5 years ago. And I had what I like to call the 12-year interview, where I was teaching technically part time, but teaching more than the full timers. And one summer, uh, there just was not work to be had. So I had my three boys. I got three sons, and I was taking them to the park every day. And the youngest one was just old enough that he could sort of go off and chase the older two. And I thought, well, what the hell am I going to do for the next 2 hours? And so I'd sit under a tree with my cup of coffee, and I just started pecking away at this story.
So how many years did it take you to write the book?
Eh, it probably took me a year to get the bones of it down, to get the basic draft. And really, I just wrote it for my boys. As I mentioned, I didn't intend to even send it out to be published because it's really hard to get published these days. I think it's always been hard to get published, and there's more competition than ever. And I met a writer who was visiting the university that I was teaching at, and I just said, "Hey, do you mind having a look at it and just see what you think?" And he looked at it and he said, "It's good. Like it needs work, but you should send it out." And I didn't really believe him because he wasn't that good of a writer. So I thought, maybe he's got low standards. But another writer came the next year, and I ran it by her, and she took it really seriously. And I read one of her books, and I thought, gosh, like her book and my book, like they could be friends. Like her characters were like my characters in a way. So I thought, well, who published her book? Let me send it to those folks and see what they think. And they picked it up. So
Okay. Uh, uh, you mean you didn't go to my good mate Chris Johnson, Shindokan Publications?
I really did think about it, Sensei. I did, because he's my good friend too. To be honest, he might be a better friend of mine than he is of yours. I don't know. Do you have one of these jackets
Nah,
of our
nah.
right
I'm not.
here?
I'm not that good to
Okay,
him. He's not that good to me. He's not that good to
he's
me.
not that good to you. Well, maybe I don't know. Do you have all of his books
Yeah, I
on
sure
hand
do.
at
I
all
sure do.
times?
You're not
Uh,
advertising for him, are you? No.
I am advertising. Chris is a great man, and I do
Jeez.
believe in his books. Look at the spine of the thing here. This is
Yep.
Jacques Paillet Sensei and Chris Johnston translated, Aikido Shugyu, written by Gozo Shioda. Now I just feel like I'm doing book reports here, but I did consider it.
Yep.
But I mean, originally, as I said, I didn't think it would be published at all. I just thought I'd hand it to my boys one day, and when this one author liked it, she said it could have a bigger audience. It's not strictly an Aikido book, and I wanted to share it with a bigger audience,
Okay. So, Chris,
beyond the
sorry,
Aikido world.
John, without giving too much away, because we want our listeners to go out and buy the bloody book, um, what's it about? Just the general outline. Don't give
Yeah, no,
don't give away too much.
it's hard for me to give away too many details because I don't really remember all the details of what's in it. I'm a busy man. I got 3 boys. I told you. Um, but basically, it's about a young kid who's gone through a lot of anxiety in his life. His parents are splitting up. His world is falling apart. His anxiety is spiking. He doesn't know what that is. And his father basically says, you can do something called yoga or you can try something called Aikido. Because I looked in a book and those are supposed to help you with anxiety. So the kid being a kid, he goes on YouTube, he sees Aikido. He says, yeah, I want to kick some ass. I want to do that one. And then he shows up to the dojo and he's standing at the threshold and he hears the dojo sounds and he smells that funky dojo smell. And he says, what the hell have I gotten myself into? Is it too late to go to yoga? And so that's the opening. That's the opening of it. And so the novel does try to deal with, without getting too heavy handed about it, kind of, it comes in at that psychological level. A lot of kids have anxiety these days, Sensei. Like,
Yep.
Anxiety wasn't a thing when I was a kid. There wasn't a word for it. You got told to stop worrying and get on with life. And that discourse has changed a lot. So on one level, it's about that. Okay. Then there's another character, and it's a young girl, female character, a young girl. And as it happens, she's a Muslim girl, and she's in the dojo training, and she's there for her own reasons. Again, without giving it all away, she's experienced a lot of racism in her life, both structural, institutional, and just some direct old school bullying. And so the boy, he wants to stick up for the girl. The problem is she's a lot stronger than he is, and she's a lot better at Aikido than he is, and she doesn't need some little white boy coming standing up and fighting her battles for her. So it's about the interplay of those two things, like
But
the boy is a little white kid. How can he act when he has empathy? He feels for her, but she doesn't want his help. So what does that leave him to do? What does that leave her to do?
okay, so John, but essentially, it is a book based on Aikido.
That's where they meet.
Okay,
They meet
all
at
right. So
Aikido.
now,
And
can I ask you a question? Like, so you're a sandan, yeah?
I am, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So all the books you held out before were written by people who were like really high up in Aikido. What gives you the qualification to write a book about Aikido and use the philosophies and everything else? What gives you that qualification?
Yeah, no,
What gives you the right?
I don't know that I am qualified. I don't know that I have the right.
So
On one level, I wrote a good story.
yeah,
Partly that's my qualification is I'm a storyteller. But even within the world of Aikido, there's a few different ways to come at it. Like reading the most recent one, Uchideshi, to go back to plug Chris Johnston's Shindoken books and Jacques Paet's experiences. It showed me that I'll never reach that level of technical expertise. I won't. I might get better at Aikido. I hope to get better at it. But what I have to offer is that I'm great at showing up. I'm great at showing up with open ears. And I'm great at receiving people's stories, receiving people's lessons, and being able to pass those back out in a way that a broader audience can learn from that. So I feel like as a Sandan, I'm perfectly positioned. And honestly, I think I'm perfectly qualified to write a story about Aikido because I don't know, I'm a bit of a middleman, an ambassador, between our little world of Aikido and the greater world at large. And that's who I want to reach with this book. I want to speak back to the Yoshinkan community and the Aikido community at large, just outside of Yoshinkan. I want you folks to see yourselves reflected in this imaginary world, but I also want to invite new people into that world. And so that's where being a Sandan, I think that's the perfect spot to be there.
There you go, people. I just challenged him with not being qualified, and he threw it in my face. So,
Yeah.
take a leaf out of his page and John's page, and if you want to do something, just do it.
You have to, Sensei. I
Yep.
mean, I talked about how I'll never reach the technical expertise of people like yourselves. I was a disaster at Aikido. I have quit Aikido so many times in my life, but it's just that quality of just showing up, just doing it, and coming back to it because I love it, and I think that counts for something. It's not everything, but I think it goes a long way. It certainly comes through in the book.
I think you're spot on. I think it's I haven't met my ambition in Aikido. I've always fallen short of my ambition. So I'm in the same boat as you. I'm not where I want to be in Aikido. But um, so let's go back a little bit. Who is John Kohl? What do you do?
Yeah. What do I do? I have a pretty simple balance in life. I'm a family man. That's really important to me. I've brought up my kids a couple of times already. Uh, I'm a professor. I teach at a technical college called Mohawk College here in Hamilton.
What do you teach?
I teach English, what at most schools would be called English, but not literary stuff. I teach like technical writing or basic academic
But,
writing.
but I thought you guys in Canada spoke American.
No, we keep the U in color. We haven't dropped the U. We speak a perfect medley of the savviness of the Americans, but with the culture and dignity of the origins of the language.
I like that. That's very smooth. I like that.
You know why? Because actually, I'm neither American nor English. My father is Irish, and I was born with a golden tongue in the proper
Sorry.
genetic tradition
No,
of the people of Ireland.
I got to watch myself of challenging you. Okay.
Indeed,
So look, and so you teach English, right?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. Um, you've spoken to me a lot about I can never pronounce the word, so I just call it teaching methodology. Give me your
Pedagogy. Pedagogy. Are
pedagogy.
we talking about pedagogy? How many? It's
That's
like
right.
four
That's right.
syllables.
I'm
Pedagogy.
I'm
It's
really bad with Greek words. So yeah.
yeah.
How how do you see Aikido teachers? Because most of us were not taught formally how to teach. So let
Uh,
me preface this, right? The lucky ones were taught good Aikido. The lucky ones,
yeah.
right? Hardly any of us were taught how to teach, and none of us were taught how to run a dojo or an organization.
What do you
So
mean you weren't taught how to teach?
we
Like, were
weren't.
you not? I mean, that's interesting to me because as a professional teacher, right, as a professor, I was never taught how to teach. They don't teach you how to be a professor. They don't. You go to grad school and they assume that you're good at school, so you must know something about it. They don't tell you anything about how to teach. And do you know who taught me how to teach? Kimeda Sensei.
Okay, we'll go back to that in a second. But don't you have a diploma of education or stuff like that?
Yeah, no, no, no. That
Oh,
took me a minute to get to. Of education? No.
so
I've got 3 degrees. I was 13 years in university. I
yeah,
got,
okay. Well,
training up to here, but not a degree in
in
education.
Australia, teachers do a diploma of education or bachelor of arts or a master's, and then go on to do a doctorate in education, uh, in actually how to teach. But most martial artists don't.
Yeah, I mean, neither do I in education.
So how'd you
You,
get
you
the
know,
job then?
well, if you want to be a high school teacher or an elementary teacher, you need a bachelor's of education. If you want to teach at a high level, they don't care so much about teaching. They care about the research and the ideas, and the teaching is just economics. which is terrible. It's really unfortunate.
Hmm.
And I don't know, but it's kind of like what you're saying about martial arts. Like they just hope that it rubs off on you, or I don't know. I don't know. But honestly, I found myself when I started to teach English at a professional level, I blanked and thought, how the hell do you do this? Like I've been around it my whole life. But that's like, I mean, I drive a car. I don't know how the hell a car engine works. I get in and I turn a key and, work the pedals, turn the steering wheel.
Yeah, but the
And I
mechanic does. The mechanic does. And if you want to swim, you don't need to know how to swim. But if you want to teach people how to swim, you need to know the mechanics of swimming.
well, I knew the mechanics of the subject matter I was teaching. But if I'm faced with a room of 200 people who really aren't all that interested in what I'm talking about, it doesn't help that I know the mechanics of the language or the mechanics of the lesson. When I say I was never taught how to teach, I mean like crowd control. I mean how to project your energy to a room, how to chunk out your time into bridging your way into the class, doing like a little warm up, how to structure, like in a typical Aikido class. That's what I did. I sat back and I said, how does Sensei teach a class? Okay, from the second he walks into the room, that's his room. He owns that room. He projects that energy. We do our typical bow in. So we have a little bit of a structured ritual that sets the tone, puts everybody's body and mind on the same page. We go through that same warm up. That's the typical Yoshinkan warm up. And I would think, okay, what's going to be my equivalent in the classroom of the bow in? What's going to be my equivalent of the warm up? Sensei walks through three techniques. Okay, how can I divide up my lesson into three chunks? So when I say that's where I learned what teaching is, that's who taught me how to teach. Like,
Yeah,
did you not
but
think about
but
that yourself?
someone like Kimeda Sensei is probably a natural.
Yeah, he is. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. And we know both in Aikido and in the field of academia that
Mm,
they're naturals, and they're
yeah,
people who are totally hopeless. They know the subject matter, but they hopeless presenters,
yeah.
right? So, uh, what makes a good? I was going to ask you another question, but you're pushing my face, so we'll leave that one out. But um, what makes a good teacher?
Oh wow, I shouldn't have to pause this long to answer that, eh? Are my
Yeah.
students in trouble that I have to stop and think about it like that? What makes a good teacher? I tell you, okay, the first three things you have to think about are audience, context, and purpose. And if you're thinking about audience, context, and purpose, it should be a given that you already know the subject matter, whether it's Aikido or English. Like you shouldn't be at the front of the room if you don't know how the car works, as it were, right?
Mhm.
So to be able to communicate that is an entirely different ball game. And it begins with audience. Who's in front of you? How can you reach those people? Can I tell you one time I was here's a little story for you. One time I was helping a very high level Yoshinkan sensei deliver a clinic class. I don't know if you've heard of him, Robert Mustard Sensei. You heard of that
Nah,
man?
nah, never heard of him. Nah,
Never heard of him. It's because he doesn't have a poster like this,
exactly.
I
Yeah, yeah.
guess. But I was helping Robert Mustard Sensei deliver a clinic, and he decided that whatever lesson he was trying to get across, I'm still not sure. He had the lot of us, myself included, as the insistent there, get up and do a sort of a catwalk. Do you know what a catwalk is?
Nah,
You've got two daughters. You don't know what a catwalk is?
nah. Man,
The
I
the
lived a sheltered life.
the runway model walk. When you see
Okay.
the
Yeah,
models
yeah.
walking down the runway, walking down the catwalk. And we had to sashay our little behinds up to the front of the room and turn around and come back. This is just a couple of years ago. And I tell you, Joe, I killed it. I crushed those 5-year-olds. I was so much sassier than any of those other 5-year-olds in the room. I was in my early 40s, but I delivered. And I mean, you wouldn't think that that kind of a lesson would be in an Aikido dojo, but that's a teacher who was paying attention to audience. That was him. And if you've met Robert Mustard Sensei, and I know that you have, uh, he could be an imposing man. He's a mountain of a man, and when he looks you dead in your eye, you're not sure if you're going to make it out of that alive. He can have a killer stare sometimes. But here I was helping him with a kids class, obviously, and he knew how to reach his audience, and I'd never seen a teacher do that before. So that's the first thing to me. What makes a great teacher? Audience.
Okay. There's three things that make a great teacher. Knowing your subject matter, knowing your students,
Yeah.
and no one knows what the third is.
And no one knows what the third is. I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
Yeah. But the thing is, you talked about the language in teaching and the importance of using the right language.
Yeah.
And do you think a lot of Aikido teachers are using the right language to get their message across? You've written to me before and you've talked about this to me.
Yeah, I mean, to me, obviously I'm biased, right? Because I do language for a living. To me, it's absolutely vital. You can't overestimate the importance of language. I mean, language is not necessarily going to make you a better martial artist. You spoke of how you have not reached your potential, judging by your own self, by your own goals. Language might not be a factor in that, but how you can share what you have accomplished, how you can share that with the rest of the world to make that meaningful to the rest of the world. That's that's a lot of that is language. I don't need the right vocabulary to watch you in a demonstration and to appreciate what you can do. But if I want to pick up even a shred of that, I rely on the language that you use. How many times have I been to your clinics when you've come to
Heaps.
no, all of them.
All of them. Yeah.
I haven't hit every class, because between the family and the work, I'm not great at making it out for the whole weekend, but I've always made it out to at least one or two sessions there. And it's the language that keeps me coming back. I can watch Joe Tambu Sensei clips on YouTube all day, and there is a lot to be said about the energy in the room, when we're, around, an accomplished sensei. But for me to grow, it's the language that you use to communicate things,
Okay. Now let me throw you something. And people listening, this, if you're an instructor, think about this, right? I believe that you cannot be taught Aikido. Aikido cannot be taught. It has to be learned. And if I went to Japan, my Japanese is non-existent, right? I can order a beer and that's about it. So I try and listen, but I catch very little of the gist of what's going on. I have to rely on other things, of other ways of learning. So how important is it that the right terminology is used, or the right? Shouldn't it be incumbent on the student to like you said, you come to seminars with your ears open? Isn't it incumbent upon the student to learn rather than the teacher to teach?
No, I mean, yes, it's incumbent on the student to learn, but not rather than the teacher to teach. You've got an obligation if you're a teacher. You've got a job to do. People are giving you their time and their money, and it's not in your hands what they walk away with, but it's in your hands to try to share something that they have a chance of picking up. And you can't control how much they're going to pick up. The best you can do is to try to shape your message and make it available. As a teacher, that's a big obligation. I'm big on that, man, because look, when I teach English professionally, nobody wants to take my class. Nobody. And it's not because I'm teaching it. It's because I teach at a technical college. I'm teaching police officers. I teach in the police foundations program sometimes. I teach people who want to be nurses, people who want to be mechanics, automotive power programs. Like I ask the students on the first day, I say, okay, hands up, guys, if you're majoring in what I'm teaching today, just hands up. And nobody puts their hand up. And I say, that's right, because you can't major in it, because it's not even a program here, because nobody wants to take it. And that's why you have to take it. So I teach to an audience that I think of as somewhere on a continuum of hostile to disinterested, right? And so I can't make them learn. I can't make them learn, but I'm going to do everything I can to take my, years of expertise of what I do know. And it's not all academic stuff. I've got lots of interesting work experience, and to try to like boil it down into some principles, right? Some like REI, something like that,
Mhm.
so that they can empower themselves with it. And that's up to them if they're going to run with it or not.
Okay, let me cut you off and run something by you. You mentioned Mustard Sensei, okay?
This,
Lazy bastard that he is. Um, you've seen what he's done. You've been Izuke,
yeah,
all right?
yeah.
And I've been around the block a few times. Very, very few people can do what he does.
Yeah.
Okay, and yet he trained under Kimeda Sensei, and he trained at the Yoshinkan. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. With Mustard Sensei, he does stuff that I don't know many people who can do.
Mm.
So, but he learned under Kimeda Sensei. He studied in the Yoshinkan. How come other people who've done the same route, gone through the same teachers, studied the same teachers, be as good as him? I'm thinking every great person, every person who is good at what they do, and I mean at a really high level, is an autodidact, which is someone who is self-taught. There's no other explanation. Otherwise, if you've gone through the mill, there should be more people coming out the other end with his qualification. But instead, it's very few and far between. Your comment?
Yeah, I agree, Sensei. I'm thinking back to, obviously I can't speak for Mustard Sensei. I wouldn't claim to do that. But thinking back to his seminars, I believe the way that he's explained that in the past is that he's just one who hasn't given up. It wasn't that he was talented. It wasn't that he was gifted. He just,
No,
when
don't
he
buy
got
that.
when he got knocked down,
No,
he
no,
got
that's
back up.
bullshit. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
That's crap. And I've said that to him, to his face. That's him being modest.
Okay, is it Sensei? With all due respect, I don't know him well enough to say. Is it him being modest, or does he believe it? Whether or not it's true, does he believe it?
You have to ask him. I won't answer for him.
He sounds sincere when he says it. It doesn't sound like a hustle. It doesn't sound
He's the
like a
biggest
lie
liar
to me.
out. Don't believe everything he says. The biggest liar out. But
All right. Well, with all due respect, Sensei. Hey, with all due respect, Sensei, you said something similar not so long ago on this very show, not this very episode, but on one of the episodes of Keep the Flame Alive. You said, be the last one. Maybe it wasn't Keep the Flame Alive. Maybe it was a different.
You're right. You're right. But in his, you're talking. He says, how do you get a seventh dan? Just don't die. But being a seventh dan and being capable of doing what he's doing, two different things.
Oh,
Two
it's
different things.
magical. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, his skill level is.
And how did he get it? There's not many people I know who can do what he's doing. And people who've gone through what the teachers he's gone through, study under the teachers, he's made it his own.
Yeah. Oh, you have to make it your own. But that's the key thing. I mean, that's what I'm talking about.
Then how important is the teaching methodology? Because other people have studied under the same teachers, received the same words, received the same advice, and not got what he's got.
Okay, but Sensei, look, we're talking about Kimeda Sensei. We're talking about Takano Sensei. We're talking about the whole stable
Yeah.
of instructors at the Hambu Dojo and wherever else Mustard Sensei has traveled. I don't know his whole CV here. Could he have gotten where he's gotten without those teachers?
No, my thing is that other people have gone through that as well.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the beautiful thing about language is, I mean, it's not a magic spell. It's not a guarantee of anything, you know? But without it, you don't stand a chance. And with it, I mean, part of language, it's not just bridging between student and teacher. The big thing about language for me is that it's bridging between yourself today and your potential. And it's not a contract, it's not binding, but this is where it's so important because when I come to your clinic, Sensei, and you say, take, don't grab, index, don't block, or don't block, yeah, keep your enemies close and your elbows closer. That doesn't mean my Aikido's better, 100% that day. That doesn't mean my elbows stop flaring, but put in the right words, I've captured like a bubble, a little idea, something, to let float around in there. And hey, if I'm lucky on the right day, I might actually have my elbows tucked in when I'm doing my elbow power 1 and 2. And because I've heard that represented in language, when my body does actually deliver on it, I recognize it and I can hopefully make it a habit. And if I'm making it a habit, all of a sudden, I'm doing better at Aikido on a regular basis. And so that's where I do think it's important to try to go to different seminars, to try to work with different teachers, because yourself and Mustard Sensei and Kimeda Sensei and Takano Sensei, Chida Sensei and Inui Sensei, like, Muguruza Sensei, Jacques Paye Sensei, these are people who have traveled through our part of the world. And I've had the great fortune of, just sitting in for a couple hours worth. You all describe things very differently. And now I get to triangulate, not just between 3 points, but with this whole constellation. And I mean, how else can I try to capture just a little bit of what you guys have to teach? I'm not going to remember the visuals of what I see, not unless I have some little clues, you know?
Mm.
Language doesn't guarantee that I'm going to be better, but it gives me like a little trail of breadcrumbs that I can try to find my way back to. Look, I've had the experience of being in a class with Kimeda Sensei, and he explains something a certain way. And I think like, damn it, man, why didn't you just say it that way before? If you had only said it that way before, I could have been a better student by now. And I've had that feeling of like, you held back, and I don't know why you held back. Then I go home and I get my pen and I get my little piece of paper and I'm writing in my notebook, wow, Sensei wrote this, he explained it this way today, and I've had a breakthrough. And I'll flip through my notes and I'll see that he said it in exactly the same way 10 years before, right? So, did the language guarantee that I would have that breakthrough? No. But on that day, the language made something click. That's number one. And number two, the fact that I can look back at my notes and say, and I was clueless, I did not get it before. That's number two. That's valuable to me because that tells me that, my progress may be so slow as to be almost immeasurable, but I'm progressing. So that language, it enables me to develop, and it also enables me to recognize that I'm developing, and I'm not getting overinflated ideas about
All
my
right.
skill
So
level,
now,
but
before we move on, can you give me an example of a good seminar you went to and a bad seminar that you went to without mentioning names?
without mentioning it,
Oh, you
so
can if you
this
want. You
this
can if
world
you
is
want.
so small. Like what?
You can. You
Well, I
can if
went
you
to
want.
this one, and this asshole made me walk like I was a model on a catwalk with a bunch of 5-year-olds. Where do you think that ranks in
Well,
the
that's
hierarchy of
what you get
seminar?
for with him. I'm not mentioning names, but yeah.
I don't mind mentioning names when names need to be mentioned. One
Okay, go for
time,
it. So and an idea of what made a bad seminar, or what you didn't enjoy, and what made a good seminar.
Yeah, I mean,
This
one
is to
time we had,
help teachers know what to do and not waste the students' time. I'm not just dredging up stuff.
yeah, no, I get it, I get it. Once upon a time, we had Shiota Jr. came and gave a clinic. And because our sensei put on the clinic, we went to it. And this was, before he left Yoshinkan, obviously.
Yep.
And he didn't, he at risk of sounding like I'm only trying to, not let go of my own point here, like a dog with a bone, his language didn't do anything for me. He didn't speak with any creativity, he didn't speak with any magic. He just taught, it seemed like syllabus technique. Like, just, it wasn't even like Kion Waza. I think it was Kion Dosa. And when Inoue Sensei taught Kion Dosa, it was magic. Okay. Even this is z, z. Does that sound familiar? That sound?
Yep.
I say that when I'm explaining things to juniors now. Ask me to define z. I'm just not a word. I'm not going to define it. But that language stayed with me. It speaks through me. Right. When Shiota Jr. taught, that never happened even one time. And it's not. There was no creativity. There was no passion. There was no love. And at the end of it, he said, he was very tight. He was very tense. And he looked at us all and he said, "Are there any questions?" And then he quickly added, like, "And I'm only taking questions about technique." I was like, what the hell does that mean? And I found out later about all the politics that were going on. But to me, he as a teacher came in with an attitude of censoring himself and censoring us. And no amount of language is going to bridge that. The most magical clinics I've been to, and they're all like, that one aside, they all have magic to offer. It's not that the senseis are expressing it in a right way or with, correct language, but you take something that's recognizable as standard and you express it in a way that shows what you've done with it, or what Mustard Sensei has done with it. And sometimes that directly contradicts what my sensei has said. Sometimes yourself and Mustard Sensei are in the same clinic directly contradicting what each other is saying.
And
And
I'm right,
that's,
he's wrong. Remember
and
that.
I was just leading up to that point. And
Okay, cool.
clearly, he has a lot to learn in that respect. But that's what makes it work. Okay. Like, share what you've learned of it. And you know what? I might not agree with everything that you're saying either, or what Mustard Sensei is saying either. But I'm going to try it on and I'm going to be a better martial artist for it. And I believe a better man for it. I don't think this is just about how to do a technique. And that's where I think the teaching stuff of Aikido, that was a big part of why I always came back to it, because it made me a better teacher professionally, because I happen to be that, I happen to do that for a living. But also, not to forget this, that's what this book is about, in all honesty. I talked about the kid with anxiety, and the psychology there. I talked about the kid who's experiencing racism, and the sociology that I was trying to get to with that. And the third part of it is that question of what makes a good teacher and what makes a bad teacher. Because I've got a couple of teachers in this book, and I'm trying to dig up some of that friction. There's a younger teacher who himself is an assistant. He's just 19 years old, and he's obsessed with getting technique exactly right. And he's an asshole for that, the way that he's coming at it. And then I've got another character who is, he's not exactly Kimeda Sensei, but he's a tribute to Kimeda Sensei. I tried to capture some of those qualities with this fictional character. You always have to say that with fiction so you don't get sued. And that to me is a tribute to a man who has been, just such a powerful force in my life as a teacher.
Yeah.
And I tried to capture his language.
I'll wait for the movie.
You'll wait for the movie.
Yeah.
You know what? When I saw the cover, that was exactly my reaction too. I was like, "Holy crap! That looks like a movie that I can't wait to see." Look at
Yeah,
this.
plug
It's
your own
like,
book. Go on, plug your own book. Yeah.
I will. I won't stop, man. I mean, I didn't design the cover. There's no ego in this. You know, look, there's a little
Put the
kid
book down.
doing kamai.
Put the book down. I want to ask you something else. You mentioned
This book.
Kimeda that book, yeah. You mentioned
Okay.
Kimeda Sensei several times, right?
Yes.
What about how long have you trained under him?
That's a hard question to answer. I first stepped on his mats in the late 90s, and I lasted a month. And what happened at the month point was one of the senior students said, "Don't you think you should get a gi by now? I think it's time to trade in the track pants for a gi." And it was too much pressure. I walked. I couldn't handle it. You know, Kimeda Sensei terrified me at that time. But I made my way back to it, you know, because I needed to rise to that challenge. And do you know what? When I came back to it, I had left town for a while. I came back and I went to a different Aikido club because I was starting at the university and there was a university Aikido club.
Which
And so
one?
I just dropped by and I asked that sensei.
Which university?
This is McMaster University in
Who is the teacher?
Hamilton, Ontario. It's
Who
near
was the teacher?
Toronto. Maybe you've heard of it. Yeah.
Who was the teacher?
Well, now I won't get into naming names, but I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why I won't name names.
I know the teacher. There's no problem.
I'm trying to be a better man, and this story will illustrate that. So I went to him, and actually, he asked me. He said, "Well, have you done Aikido before?" And at that point, I had trained under Kimeda Sensei for a longer chunk of time in Toronto. In all fairness, because Kimeda Sensei was teaching Hamilton and Toronto. I said, "Yeah, you know, I got up to orange belt under Kimeda Sensei." This guy spent the next 10 minutes just trying to tear down Kimeda Sensei. Like just petty stuff. He said, "Well, I bet he told you this about himself. I bet he told you that. I bet he told you that he's this and he's that." And I could honestly say, I've never heard him say any of that about himself. And I walked out of there. And I went to Kimeda Sensei's club, which was way out of the way. It was really inconvenient for me to get to. And I walked in, I said, "Hi, Sensei. I don't know if you remember me from Toronto a couple years ago. I was a very junior student." And I said, "Can I ask you, Sensei, there's another Aikido club in town, and it's taught by this man." And he didn't even change expression. He just, I said, "Well, do you have anything to say about him or his club or anything?" And Sensei just said, "Nope." Totally deadpan. And I was like, wow, the contrast between those two teachers. I said, "All right, I'm ready to pay my dues, Sensei. You know, I'm sorry it took me this long to get here."
I have some stories too, but I won't speak ill of the dead.
Us.
Okay, so Kimeda Sensei, what stood out about him? And you know, you've been with him for a long time.
I have been, yeah. So I mean, you know, over 20 years I've been around them, and you know, I'm not pretending to be a diligent student. I'm not his most long-standing student. I'm not even the most senior student in our little wee club.
You've always spoke very highly of him, and you know, you know what I think of him.
Yeah.
Why have you got such a connection with him? What's his standout trait?
He's balls out. He doesn't care. He does what he does. And if you like it, great. Come and get some. And if you don't like it, thank you for coming out. Have a good day. He won't even advertise, Sensei. We're trying to tell him, "Sensei, we got to advertise. We got to get some fresh blood." He says, "If people want to learn from me, they'll find me." It's like, oh my God, man. I want a tenth of that confidence. You know, here I am pandering to my students going, "I know you don't want to be here, but please learn from me." And he's up there like, this is what I do.
Okay, people, I'm going to do a plug now. I wanted to interview Kimeda Sensei for the Pioneer series, but he declined. So I'm going around his back, mind you, with his permission, and I'm going to interview some of his top students. It's going to appear on the Pioneer series in February. It's only available on aikitv.online. And this man, you know, I'll let his students tell you about him. But if you want to look up the history of Yoshinkan Aikido in North America, you cannot go past his name. And you know, he's a harsh man, but he's always had my back. And for me, he's a top teacher and a great man. So that's my plug for Kimeda Sensei.
Yeah. As far as them being a harsh man, I could tell you, he's told us, he said, yeah, now that I'm older, you know, I'm going to relax a little bit more. I'm going to ease up. And then you get up to take his uke and boom, like, bounce off the mats. Not that he's out being irresponsible or showing off or anything. It's just like, I mean, he's one of these top guys. His skill level is insane. Like you grab his wrist and it's over. And you know that when you grab his wrist. I pity the UK who doesn't know
that. Okay, we're gonna leave Kimeda Sensei and go back to something you wrote to me, and you used this word. You said, "I don't know if you developed this. I can't pronounce it. HUERISTIC yourself or what?"
Yeah, heuristic. What was I talking about?
It was a long email, but what's that mean?
Yeah, I tend to, the way that I speak and the way that I write are two very different things. So when I was writing this book, 8 Times Up, don't know if you heard of it, from a kid's perspective, that was a real challenge to write from a kid's perspective, all these complex ideas. But
hold on. Answer the question. What does that word mean?
Oh, heuristic. It's like a little operating principle, right? So, to get through the day, we don't make every decision as a conscious, willful decision. When you're looking at your shoes, you don't stop and ponder, which one should I put on my left foot? Which one should I put on my right foot, right? Like you've got habits, you've got operating principles. And sometimes it's as simple as what shoe do I put on what foot? And sometimes they can be more complex, like ethical things. How am I going to handle a conflict? If I see somebody, if I see a guy roughing up his girlfriend on the street, how am I going to handle that? So they're your operating principles. So I'm not sure which little operating principle I would have been asking you about in that message. Because as you say, I do go on once my fingers hit the key.
I think you were talking about me touching you, but in an appropriate way.
Yeah, wait, what now?
This thing about touching the knee for Hijishime has proven to be the difference between technique very rarely working and technique working every single time.
Yeah.
I think I asked you to grab your knee as you turn.
Yeah.
Thank you for the insight. I don't know if you developed this, whatever word yourself or what.
That was a game changer for me. Yeah. Where did you come up? Did you come up with that? Like I'm curious to know how your mind works when you are, because Sensei, like you're asking me all this stuff about teaching and whatever. And you're kind of playing devil's advocate, but like you're a man who puts a lot of thought into teaching. Like you're asking a lot of questions for a guy who puts a lot of thought into teaching, I think.
If you knew how my mind worked, my girlfriend would marry you. Right. But that aside, I don't know. I thought that one up myself, but there's, you get to a point where sometimes you don't know if it's your own or if you saw it somewhere or whatever.
Yeah.
When you do it all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, that one I can safely say I thought of myself. But I don't know. Sometimes you experiment, and again, is it ethical to experiment on your students' dime?
Yeah, no, that's part of the contract. Yeah, no, we're there. As a sandan, I have one foot in either camp. I do a bit of teaching, but I do a lot more studenting than I do teaching in our club. That's part of the program. That's an honor for us to be part of that discovery, because we're learning at the same time. Or at least if a student is worth their salt, they're learning.
I've been to the Oshinkan where, back in the old days where I was taught something. A year later or 2 years later, I go back and it's like, no, don't do that. Do this. That's like, but that's what you taught me last time. So they were
Yeah.
experimenting while they were teaching, and I'm probably
Yeah.
doing the same. Is
Yeah.
that
You have.
ethical?
Yeah.
Is that ethical?
Yeah. I don't want some dead, scripted set of movements that was figured out 50 years ago and hasn't evolved since then. Aikido is a language, and languages are alive. We were talking about, you said earlier on, you said, I thought you spoke American. I mean, how far English has come. If you look at Old English as a language, it's not recognizable. It's not intelligible. You can't read it, Old English, Beowulf and whatnot. It's a different language. And languages evolve through use, through experimentation, through play, through what's functional.
Not always for the better. Listen to Trump
No,
speak.
Trump, okay, but objectively, it's fascinating to me. He's a very persuasive speaker. How can a man be that stupid and that cruel and that evil and still sound so persuasive, whether you find him persuasive or not? You can't deny that millions of Americans, they believe what he has to say. How?
Well, then you have to question the IQ, don't you? Or the biases that are inherent.
Yeah, that's part of it. That's a big part of it. Like, they're already primed to be receptive to that,
Hmm.
right? And yet, like, there's something about him
Yeah,
that
look,
objectively, but we're
we're
getting
gonna
away.
have to go on to another 2 hours if we're gonna talk about that.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to get away from your question of, is it ethical for teachers to experiment? Because it certainly can go wrong. There are certainly cases where a teacher experimenting, not that I've been on the receiving end of it, but when I was a junior, I was on the receiving end of it with senior students sometimes, or I've read about it in certain Aikido books where certain senseis, they break bones because they're experimenting,
Yeah.
and that's not okay. But, like, if we can kind of in this conversation kind of safely say, obviously that's not what we're talking about. If you're trying to professionally grow, I'm hoping that that's going on at seminars a little bit. I'm hoping that you're kind of floating something out that you've only kind of half baked, and you want to see if this can take our Aikido to a new place. What I don't want to see is something that only, like, I don't want you to, like, bullshit your way through. Don't get the wrong idea. But I don't want somebody who feels that they have 100% figured it out.
Yeah. The thing is that, and I'll put this out there, teachers can do things, but by virtue of being a teacher, your challenge is then to get it through to your student. So it's not the principle that's being experimented on, it's the delivery method and the way to work that principle in technique. That's
It's
what's being
almost like
experimented on.
it's almost like we should have a conversation about language here today, and how vital. Yeah, I'm glad you made that point about how crucial language is, especially in seminars.
Yeah. But and going back to ethically speaking in seminars, I find a lot of teachers do not respect the time, money, and effort people put in to come to seminars.
How
They
so?
they
How
they,
does that?
they stand there and they lecture people.
Yeah.
And if you go back to my previous point that a technique cannot, or Aikido cannot be taught, it has to be learned. So no matter
Yeah.
how much you talk about it, you have to give time for people to practice it and learn it.
Well, this is what I mean when I say Aikido is a language. I don't mean a verbal language or like something that you can write down. Verbal language, like the words that we use, those are, as I said, they're only like kind of a bridge or a bubble. You need to speak that language with your body. You need to try to hear the words that have been said, but you need to try to, like, manifest the language of Aikido. And that's where taking uke is such a privilege, because that's the only way to sort of like directly hear what it
Okay.
is the sensei is trying to say.
before we came on air, before we started recording, you said that you write differently from how you speak. You use words differently when you write, words you'd never use when you speak. So how people learn differently, people express themselves differently. How do you gauge that? How do you bridge that as a teacher?
Well, it's a great question.
Thank
Like
you.
in the
I'm not
world
just a good-looking face. See, I've got good questions as well.
of in the world of pedagogy, right? Which is like the theory, I guess, of how people learn and how to teach. There have been different theories on that. One of the prevailing theories not so long ago was that different people have different learning styles. Audio, visual.
Mhm.
Reading words. Whatever, and it's been discredited. Like people have different learning preferences, but they don't learn any better if they're learning within that preference. So, I mean, I do try to pay attention to what's going on in pedagogy, and I think about that in the world of Aikido, and not to make it all about him, but this is another reason where I have so much respect for Kimeda Sensei. So much of his traditional independent teaching method is so consistent with cutting edge pedagogy right now. So qualities like when learning is effortful, like it's not easy to come up with the answer, which again reminds me of Mustard Sensei and what you were talking about. When it isn't served up to you on a platter, when you have to work for it to get it, studies are showing now that you're going to retain the information for much longer. And that's why it's so crucial for senseis delivering seminars not to stand up and over explain. You have to give students a little piece and then they have to work with their bodies to try to figure it out.
I have to take you to task about that term, cutting edge pedagogy.
Yeah.
That's a whole lot of crap. That's just like people, you know, it's the proven theory till it's unproven.
Yeah.
And it goes round in cycles. It's cyclical.
I agree with you. I'm not
That's the
interested
first.
so much in academic research. Yeah, this is where I trained as an academic researcher. I didn't train to teach at a technical college, and I just got so fed up with exactly what you're saying. Researchers are constantly chasing, at least in my field, they were constantly chasing their own tail, and I didn't have any patience for it. So, but I mean, within the field of university pedagogy, that is what's considered cutting edge right now.
The problem is everything is now based on statistics, right? And they want, hold on, hear me out. Things are based on statistics, and then people chase the statistics. They teach according to the statistics. Now, what's important is not always quantifiable, and what's quantifiable is not always important.
I agree.
And that's an issue. That's an issue with academia.
Because the bigger problem is what's quantifiable is what's fundable. So administrators will only shovel money at things if they can put a statistic behind it. And I'm no statistician. That's I'm not a mathematician at all.
People, you're listening. That was worth your dollar there. Just what he said. That was
which one?
That was. What's quantifiable is what's fundable.
Yeah.
Or what's fundable is what's quantifiable. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's exactly right. And that's where education is just gone downhill.
That's why I had a 12-year interview, as a research professor, because I didn't care about that. And after a while, I got burned out of trying to work within that world. And I was like, I just want to teach, man. Like, I'm good at it. I'm good at this. I'm good at understanding how language works. I'm good at making it work in the real world. I want to share that with people so that they're empowered. I just want to do that.
That's my excuse for bombing out of university, because I wasn't interested in passing exams. I just wanted to learn. And the chicks were good. The chicks were hot too.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to wind it up now, John. Have you got any final words, not final words, that's not a nice thing to say, but
Final words. Oh my God.
have you put the book down? We haven't
What?
got
Oh,
there yet.
sorry. I didn't even notice. Sometimes I just pick it up sometimes. I don't know how it got in my hand. Yeah.
Is there anything you want to say to people out there who in the Yoshinkan world? Because most of our listeners practice Yoshinkan Aikido. Some others do, the Yoshinkan system of Aikido. Others do Aikido, other styles of Aikido. Any words of advice? Any thoughts, comment?
I feel like my insight right now, I don't know how original it is. I don't know how useful it is. What feels like a breakthrough for me right now is understanding that Aikido is a language. I don't know if there's anything we can say about a spoken language that we can't also say about Aikido. It needs to grow, it needs to evolve, it needs to be a living thing. You can decide whether you want to take your language and go out in the world and have arguments and try to defeat people with your language, or whether you want to use your language to bridge and connect and make the world a better place. And to me, as for Yoshinkan, as opposed to Aikido generally, Yoshinkan, it's just a it's just a teaching structure to try to teach the grammar of that language. But understanding how grammar works doesn't mean that you're necessarily a fluent speaker. And so let's try to stay focused on what unites us as people who speak the same language in this little world of Aikido of ours, this beautiful, magical world of Aikido of ours.
It's well put. I've often thought about Aikido as language, but I haven't been as eloquent as you.
Yeah, don't try to jump on my last word. You said I could have the last word, and I had it.
People,
what are you holding there?
Oh, sorry. There's the book. There you go.
There's the book. It's available.
Mine's autographed.
Yours is autographed.
Yep. And how can people order the book, John?
However they want. It's on Amazon. I know around here it's on bookstore, in bookstores, on shelves. In the States, you can order it through the major distributors. If anybody ever wanted to shoot me an email to get a signed copy, you're welcome to shoot me an email.
There you go. And the email will be on the Facebook page when this is advertised. He'll sign a copy for you, and it'll come from all the way from buttfuck Hamilton.
Hamilton proud, baby. The hammer. Okay. The hammer.
All right. Thank you very much, John.
Love you, Sensei.
Look,
thank
people,
you.
Sorry. What were you gonna say?
Love you, Sensei. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me on the show, and I really do look forward to the day when you make it back to our part of the world, or hopefully one day when I can make it out to your part of the world.
Anytime. Yeah. Look, everyone, if you haven't caught it, the Pioneer series with David Lynch Sensei was posted recently, and the next one is with Gadi Shaw. I think that's coming out in January, and in February, the Pioneer series is going to be about Kimeda Sensei. Now,
awesome.
The Pioneer series is my way of setting history in stone. There's too many people changing history to suit their narrative, and I want to be able to do my bit to say, this is history, this is what the people who made it thought, or the people who followed them thought. So there you go. And John, once again, thank you very much.
Thanks, Sensei. Us.